I think when things get difficult and challenging, we need a reason to keep holding on. Holding on to our relationships, to our health, to our family, holding on to our faith. We need a reason to keep holding on. Reasons keep us holding on. I was watching a new reality show on Netflix the other day called The Physical 100, and I saw this and I thought, this is my jam. It's a Korean reality show we call K-pop. And this is what the thing is. There's 100 contestants on this show, 100 athletes from all different types of sports. There's Olympic athletes, male and female. There's losers, there's wrestlers, there's MMA fighters, there's a professional baseball player, a pitcher, there's dancers, there's bikers. You name it, there are athletes representing different sports. 100 of them. And the object of the sport, of this contest, is to see which discipline, which physique is the most capable. Oh, wow, this will be interesting. They're bodybuilders too, and I thought, well, they look good, but I'm not too sure about those guys. So this is set up over a number of elimination quests. So the first quest, no one knows what it is. They're all thinking, I'm going to do so well. My discipline is going to represent here. I'm going to win this. I'm very confident. They're all thinking this. Saying, I'm going to represent all losers. I'm going to represent all women. There was an MMA fighter, famous MMA fighter who was almost 50, said, I'm going to represent all middle-aged men. And I said, yeah, you go. So the first event, they didn't know what it was. All these series of events. The first event they find out is going to be 50 people, half of them eliminated in one event. And of course, it's subtitled, so it's really fun to watch the translation, right? All the reactions. I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed how supportive they were of each other, and just watching how the different cultures view competition was great. But the first event was this weird contraption over water that they had to grab onto and hold onto for time. You let go, you fall into the water. So they get onto this thing, and it's on hydraulics, and it races them way up. And they have to hold on. The thing is, the bars were really thick. So fat bars are harder to hold on to, and people are hanging on with different ways. Some of them, have their elbows up there and their legs. They're just doing all these things to hold on. And you think maybe that would be easy, right? I'm sure all of you are probably thinking, this sounds easy. I should be on this show. I was thinking, this is easy. Anyway, sooner than you would think, people start dropping into the water. The really big guys usually were the first to drop. Started dropping, heavy. Not always, but sometimes. The longer it went, the more impressive it got. And finally, it was down to a few people. And you can see them just concentrating. The winner stayed for 18 minutes and 15 seconds. So that is pretty good. I mean, I thought it might be a bit longer, but it's a fat bar, so it's kind of hard. Now, this is what was really interesting about it. The people that had a reason to hold on could hang on. Some people let go of the bar. You know the difference? Okay, so some people decided to let go. Some people's bodies let go. Do you hear the difference? One is about determination and a reason. The other is about giving up. The winner had a reason to keep holding on to that bar. Didn't let go, even though it was hard. It was mental toughness more than anything, and a strong reason to hang on. It wasn't my hero, but he still did well, just so you know. I think faith is like that. Sometimes it feels like we're weak and we can't hold on and we want to give up and let go of our faith. And we need a reason to hold on to our faith. We continue in our series today through Hebrews, and we pick up in chapter 4. And I'm going to read to you Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14 to 16. This is what it says. So then, since we have a great high priest who has entered heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all of the same testings we do, yet he did not sin. So, let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it most. To people that were slipping, that were losing their faith, he's giving a reason to hold on to their faith. And he gives a really simple answer, a really simple reason. Jesus is your reason for holding on to your faith. It's very simple. These early Christians were slipping. They were almost ready to let go of their faith. They were slipping away from their faith and losing their grip. They had doubts and disappointments, and they had pressure from society, from both the Jews and the Greeks. And it was very difficult for them to hold on to their faith. Where they were at was a real question. I think it's a real fair question when you're really struggling and trying to hold on. It's what the question those people holding on to the bar asked. Is it worth it? Is it worth holding on, or should I let go? Is it worth it? What's my reason for holding on? There were people in a deep faith crisis. Now, I'm aware that this is a real issue today as well. There is a lot of letting go of faith. People saying, I don't believe it anymore. I'm going to let go of my faith. I don't have a reason to believe anymore. There was a recent article in Christianity Today, a 2022 article called The Decline of Christianity Shows No Sign of Stopping. It's a really encouraging headline, right? When you see that, I got to read that. So this is what it said. The people who identify as Christians continue to drop year after year. Shows no sign of slowing down. They studied 15,000 adults, and they found that people are not holding on to their faith. They are letting go. The study showed that nearly a third of Christians raised in Christians' homes don't identify as Christians anymore. They identified as none or nothing for religion. I just have a hunch. We probably don't need to look in magazines to know that that's true, to verify that, because we've all had that kind of experience. We've observed it. We saw just recently in the pandemic all the broken relationships. We saw people just kind of slip away. We don't know what happened. Some people today are consumed by doubt and don't feel safe expressing those doubts within the church body. We've all heard stories about people being hurt by other people in the church. We've heard stories or we've experienced it. This isn't a distant issue. This is a pretty close issue for us today. Much of it is disappointment in God's people. And I can't help but think and feel so burdened that we need to not just talk about Jesus, we need to look like Jesus and act like Jesus and love like Jesus. God's people need to look like Jesus. And I really feel like holding on to this. I have such faith that if people, our people, God's people look like Jesus, I don't think there'd be that slipping away like there is. Now, I think the early church was profoundly discouraged. And Hebrews is a sermon of encouragement. We call Hebrews a sermon because that's the best way to describe this book. It's not really an epistle like the other books. We think it was a sermon preached multiple times to different audiences. And it gives complex arguments for really simple things. If you want a summary of Hebrews, it's basically this. Jesus is the reason and foundation of our faith. He is the way. The answer to these problems of losing faith that the writer of Hebrews gives, the preacher, we'll call them the preacher. We don't know if it was he or she, so I'll call them them. Priscilla, or Apollos, or someone else, we don't know. They give this reason, and it might seem simplistic, but I think it changes everything. They say, hold on to Jesus. Jesus is the reason we can keep holding on to our faith when we feel like letting go. The preacher gives reasons we can keep holding on to our faith when we feel like letting go. We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is our likeness. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. Sorry, I think I'll just leave it to you because I'm really bad at this, Al. I'm sorry I interfered. I've given up the controller, so I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to trust you. Okay, sorry. I think I said something wrong. We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is our likeness. He is our likeness. You know what that means? He had a full physical body. He's doubted. He's been discouraged. He's been tempted. This is the kind of God we hang on to. And it means that he understands. This is verse 15. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all of the same testings we do, yet he did not sin. Let's think about that human part again, because I find it a bit uncomfortable when we get right down to it, what's going on here. That the pre-existent Word, through whom all things were created, who was and is to come, who is to his core holy, a being of ultimate awe and glory and power, is with us. Human. Fully human. Not unapproachable, not untouchable, not someone you couldn't look at, but you could look at him and see he's got brown eyes. Of course he's got brown eyes, right? The best. He ate and drank, worked and slept, laughed and cried, and he experienced all the temptations that you have experienced. All of them. Let's think about that for a second. Let that sink in. Let me pause. All of them. What do you believe about Jesus? He loved us so deeply, he walked with us. He is our brother. He is with us. We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is our likeness. So the preacher gives another reason for holding on to our faith when we feel like letting go. We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is God's likeness. This person who experiences all of that stuff that we go through, the temptation, physical, mental, emotional struggles, who experience pain, suffering, loss, hurt, betrayal, is, as verse 14 says, Jesus, the Son of God. He is more than that also, as Hebrews 1:3 says, he radiates God's own glory and expresses the very character of God. and he sustains everything by the mighty power of his command. Jesus is God's very likeness. He is the holiness of the burning bush that we looked at a little while ago, the holiness of the Holy of Holies, the presence of pure love, the presence of pure beauty and pure goodness and pure justice. He is exalted to the highest place. The one who experienced temptation, all of that temptation, ate and drank, worked and slept, laughed and cried, was God's own exact likeness, as it says in Hebrews. And this God-man wasn't such just to prove a point, but to show what God is like. He's the humble king who loves and walks with his people. I think we need to be aware of something, this contrast. Think of being in this society. I want to contrast this Jesus to the Greek gods of the day. Now, Zeus and the Greek gods saw humans as their playthings. It was fun to meddle with humans because they were nothing. They were just peons. They were to be used. And these gods were full of love for themselves. Think of narcissism. They were good at that. This is such a contrast. This Jesus to the Greek gods, Zeus, all those other gods. This is what God is like. God looks like Jesus. We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is God's likeness. The preacher gives another reason for holding on to our faith. When we feel like letting go, we can hold on to our faith because Jesus is our high priest. Because of that, because he is one of us and God's likeness, he is the great, perfect high priest. This is what it says. Since we have a great high priest who has entered heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. So for many of us, I think the language of priests carries meaning that might not fit here. The imagery comes from the Old Testament, and we need to go back to that and move away from this modern idea of priests a little bit. It's temple imagery. It's imagery from the tabernacles and the Holy of Holies. And priesthood in the Old Testament was there to solve something. It was there to solve a problem. There was a problem. God is holy, and his holiness is unapproachable. The priest's job was to approach God on behalf of the people, in his holiness, on behalf of all the people for their shortcomings and sin and brokenness. And remember something important here. The priesthood and the temple imagery, as always, even in the law, was meant to be restorative and healing. Jesus is our high priest, and he is more. He is greater than any other high priest was. He is more. Jesus, as our great high priest, advocates us with compassion and passion and caring and love. But Hebrews has more to say about this. It has more to say than this. This is clear in the book of Hebrews. This is a main theme. Jesus had to be made like us in every way so that, as the greatest of all priests, he could ransom us from our condition. Jesus became all that we are so that he might lead us to God. So this high priest, Jesus, fully in our likeness, fully in God's likeness, invites us and calls us and welcomes us into God's presence. His very presence. The language used is the throne of grace in verse 16. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God, the throne of grace. There we will receive his mercy and we will find grace to help us when we need it most. This invitation, come. Come to this throne of grace, and we can boldly approach the throne. We can storm that throne into the presence of God himself, where Moses couldn't even look, couldn't even wear his sandals. We can go right there. You might know it as prayer. As Baptists, we might call it the priesthood of all believers, where we can talk directly to God. It's what Jesus has done. Because of Jesus, we can approach God directly, and we know we will receive his mercy and his grace and help when we need it. He is for us. We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is our high priest. Why can we hold on to our faith when we feel like letting go? We can hold on to our faith because Jesus is our likeness. Jesus is God's likeness. And Jesus is our high priest. I think there's something else that's really important that this all leads to, and it's connected to a big why question. The why of Jesus being in our likeness, the why of Jesus being the priest, the why of Jesus being in God's likeness. And the big picture of all of this is God is doing something that gives all of us reason for hope when we might feel like letting go of that bar. Because I think for us to think that all of us in the individual level, at the me level, that does help. That Jesus is with us as individuals at the me level. That does help. But it's not the whole picture. All of this is for something. God is creating a people for his name who look like Jesus. I think we need to pay close attention to this. Holding on to Jesus means becoming like Jesus. The more we hold on to Jesus, approach Jesus, walk with Jesus, lean on Jesus, the more we look like Jesus. There was another study I found absolutely intriguing and kind of a bit surprising, actually. They did a study of the people who had let go of their faith, who walked away, who no longer believed, and asked them this question that seems kind of silly: do you still pray? Amazingly, most of them said yes, they still prayed. Very interesting. Walk away from faith, but yes, I still pray. When I heard that, I thought of this. I've never heard anyone say, I left the church because of Jesus. I've never heard that. I don't like what he stands for. He's mean. I'm leaving because of Jesus. Here's the thing I think is striking about this. Jesus wasn't the problem. Jesus' people were the problem. And I think it's a case of church going versus church being. Here's what the Bible teaches is the reason for us to hold on and to look like Jesus. We look at Jesus so that we can look like Jesus. Jesus became like us so that we can become like him. You know, in this series we've talked about atonement, at-one-ment, the actions of God to bring us together with him. God's actions of forgiveness and healing and new life through his becoming human, his death, his resurrection, and his sending of the Spirit. God's work to create a holy people for his name that declare his love for the world by who they are and how they are. When we read this about holding on to Jesus, we need to hold on to this. We don't hold on alone. We're connected. My holding on or letting go affects your holding on or letting go. That's why we're called a body. We're all parts of a body, and we all have value, but the parts need to belong to a body. A foot's not very good without a leg. We look at Jesus so that we look like Jesus. We. The me finds their place in the we. We who are in the body, in Christ, find that we belong in the we. God is creating a people for his name to declare the kingdom of God and his healing mission and presence to the world. That's what atonement is for. I hear hope in that. Despite the disappointment of God's people, there is so much hope in God's people. God's people are the greatest source of hope when they look like Jesus. Holding on to Jesus means we can change the world. Where are you today? Are you barely holding on to your faith? Ready to let go? I've been there. Many of us have been there. We've had disappointments with people, disappointments with ministry, discouragement. Might surprise you. You probably never heard this, but sometimes it's hard being a pastor. I've had some tough times. I've had to refocus. And I found that I had to make it simple. Hold on to Jesus. Jesus made a difference. I remember when I was candidating here 6 and some years ago, 80 years ago, no. I remember Brian read something that I had wrote in my ministry information profile, it's called. And I want to share it with you today because it reminded me of something. This is what I wrote. I'm becoming more and more convinced that my beliefs are held together simply by the conviction that Jesus Christ is the Messiah and the incarnate God. All my beliefs flow from this conviction. Hold on to Jesus. Sounds simple, but I'm going to go into someone's corner here. Karl Barth, the great theologian. Someone said, summarize your whole theology, all your volumes of theology in one sentence. Would you do that, please? Everyone in the crowd laughed. He said, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. That's what he said. So my friends, don't let go. You have a reason to hold on, a good reason. Jesus is your reason to hold on and not let go. Hold on. Hold on to your faith. Hold on to Jesus.